Well, hello, listeners and viewers. Welcome to another edition of CHP Talks. We are here today with former Member of Parliament, Rob Anders, and we are going to be talking about the Conservative leadership race, about Erin O'Toole, and about the future of our country for social conservatism. So with that, Rob, do you want to introduce our special guest, Rob, today?
Yes, great. It's good to have Rob Anders with us. Rob, thank you for joining us. Rob Anders is a former MP for Calgary West. He was elected in 1997 and went on to win re-election 5 times until 2015 when he was ousted by some red Tories within his own party, but that's another story. He served on numerous parliamentary committees during his years in Parliament and is well known for his unflinching stance on principles and his willingness to stand alone when duty and conscience demand. He's been involved in politics all his life and continues to be an active voice for freedom in Canada. As an MP, he took the time to meet with me when I was new to Ottawa, and I really appreciated that. He has boundless energy. We value his opinions on all things political. Rob Anders, welcome to CHP Talks.
Thank you. I need to double what I'm paying you for those things. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to start, I know a little bit of your story, but can you just share with us how and why you got involved in the political arena, which is not always a fun place to be?
Yeah, well, it's funny, back in 1987, when I was a wee gaffer, and I saw the creation of the Reform Party, I was kind of excited to see this all. How lucky was I to be in a place like Calgary, where so much of this was transpiring, et cetera, the heartbeat of this stuff. And I think about the issues that drew me in at the time. The national debt at that time was in the hundreds of billions of dollars. I never thought in my lifetime, I wasn't sure if in my lifetime that it would get into the trillions of dollars, but here we are, thanks to Justin Trudeau. Yeah. And thanks for the original debt to his father, Pierre. And then I think of some of the moral issues. The criminal justice stuff at the time, they were bringing through the Young Offenders Act and the kid gloves they were treating young offenders with, the light touches that some of these serial rapists and everything else were getting away with. And these things drew me. And I think it was bad in 87, but it's much worse today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sobering thoughts.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So can you give us a little bit of background on this Conservative Party leadership race? It's just been decided a few days ago, and so now we know where we're at. It was always a lot of guesswork, but was it an unexpected outcome for you?
Well, McKay, he started off by attacking Andrew Scheer even before the race began. This whole point system was actually brought in to merge the parties so that if McKay ran for the leadership at some stage, he would have a snowball's chance in hell. Because if you had one member, one vote in places like Alberta, where we have a huge chunk of the membership, it would mean that his votes in Nova Scotia would not be, as significant. Well, this guy had a field that was set up for him, and he blew it. And the reason was because he was the mean girl at the beauty pageant. He tried to, get Sloan disqualified inside the caucus. He pushed, despite COVID-19, for this thing to be sped up and faster than it was. He was, like I say, mean to Richard Descarais. They disqualified Karahalios. They took out 2 SOCONs, to 50% of the SOCONs potentially running. And he still didn't win because he was nasty to his other components, right? And his wife could have told him, being a former Miss Canada beauty pageant winner, that you got to be Miss Congeniality, these things, especially the more candidates there are on the ballot. And, Hamish Marshall was quick to point out that who's the one who missed the open net this time, in terms of his criticisms that he had of Andrew Scheer. So this really was Peter's to blow, and he did. He lost it.
Do you think he's done in politics, or where will we see him go, do you think?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if O'Toole appointed him to the Senate or something like that if he got the chance. But I actually think the road ahead for Erin is much tougher than people might suspect, because what the party needed was they needed a Western-based, full-spectrum conservative. So Andrew Scheer, despite all the criticisms they leveled against him for only getting 121 seats, which was substantially better than the 99 that Harper walked away with, right? He was the guy. That was the type of person you needed. I mean, despite, one could quibble about how Andrew treated Brad Trost and, et cetera, and whatever. But the thing is, that's kind of the positioning we needed to have. Now what's going to happen is when you've got kind of this red Tory who was pretending to be open to the blues, et cetera, it's just going to fan the flames of Wexit. And if people thought that Maxime Bernier with the People's Party of Canada split off, 2% of the vote, I think Wexit's going to split off a lot more. And right? I think that the ability for O'Toole to hold on to the seats that the party gained in Winnipeg, in Regina, in Edmonton, in suburban Vancouver, going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
Not easy.
So in terms of Wexit and the whole situation out west, O'Toole didn't even necessarily do the best of the four contestants out there. So I guess that really brings us to Leslyn Lewis.
Yeah, well, that was interesting, right? Because she started off with John McEtitian, who's a very capable tactician, ran the Conservative Leadership Foundation out in Ontario to train people how to run effective campaigns. And it's probably the best thing we've seen in Canada. Leadership Institute in the United States probably being the best thing I've seen south of the 49th. And then switched out to Steve Outhouse, who was the campaign manager formerly for Pierre Lemieux. I would have loved to have seen Pierre Lemieux enter this race again. He's a good, principled guy, military background, solid Catholic, very, traditional marriage, pro-life, et cetera. He would have been a fantastic candidate. Would have loved to see him run again. But, he ran the last election, didn't get elected, didn't have a seat in the Commons. It's tough because you're $1 million resources-wise per year behind if you don't have a seat. So he decided not to go for it. But with Leslyn Lewis, if it was a one-member, one-vote system rather than this whole point jiggery-pokery stuff, she probably would have knocked off Peter MacKay on the second ballot. Because Peter MacKay was only in this because of the point system. And in places like Atlantic Canada, where he had a small number of votes, but translated into a larger number of points, percentage-wise and whatever. So had it been a one-member, one-vote, MacKay would have been wiped off at the second ballot. It would have been between O'Toole and Leslyn Lewis on the final ballot.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone's guess, but
right.
Deck was stacked in a sense against her.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I'd like to mention some of the other candidates. Like my first choice was Derek Sloan. I know he was up against, a very short period in the House of Commons. Did not necessarily have the support of a lot of caucus members because he was new to caucus, et cetera. But on the issues, really solid, really good. Yeah. And so just like last time, my first ballot choice last time went to Pierre Lemieux because he was best on the issues. And then my second ballot choice was kind of, who do I think pragmatically could actually win this that's kind of closer to my worldview? And so I voted Scheer on the second ballot. I know I love Brad, but I thought he wasn't going to make it to the final round. He did actually, at one point, the media was all spooked because he made it to third place, God bless him. But, then this time around, I voted Sloan on my first ballot. And on my second ballot, I didn't think that Lewis would make it, the way she did to everything. I thought Sloan might have actually done better than he did. And so I thought O'Toole over MacKay, and so it's kind of a brutal process because there were people who should have run that should have been in this race that weren't in this race. Richard Descarais resigned from the Harper PMO because Harper rejected recruiting social conservatives in the province of Quebec. Descarais wanted to go after the former social creditistes, a lot of the rural socially conservative folks, and Harper didn't want that. So Descarais was like, okay, well, I'm out of here. So now he worked also with Mario Dumont in the ADQ, who I would argue is probably the most conservative provincial party in the country at the time. So great organizer in Quebec, tons of background there. Had Descarais been in the race, I mean, as it was, O'Toole actually beat out MacKay in Quebec, which is kind of shocking because Brian Joseph Mulroney, worked all his contacts to try to bring in those people in Quebec. I remember when McKay won the PC leadership race way back when, and I walked into the bleachers, I was talking to the people in the Quebec stands, they were all there for Brian Joseph Mulroney. They weren't there for Peter MacKay. So, or more so, they were there for Brian Mulroney. So the fact that if Descartes had been in the race, I think he would have done very, very well in Quebec.
Can you, for our audience, can you just replay what took place with Richard Descartes?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, they did their best to disqualify him. I mean, he was in the top three. He was doing well. He had his signatures. He had the numbers, all that stuff. He was in good positioning, but because of some of his statements where he just basically said, like, I'm not in favor of the LGBT agenda, basically, they said, well, that's not good enough for us, et cetera. So they wanted to become the Progressive Party. And I blame a lot of that with regard to McKay and his people, and some of these other red Tories who just were like, well, that's not the type of party we want. Well, if you don't keep SOCONs in the tent and allow them to run at least, don't be surprised. And I know I talked to a lot of people who were on my former riding association. I talked to former MPs. I talked to former, executives for the party. There's a lot of people who are in limbo right now that say, well, we're not crazy about this. What else are we going to do? And they're looking at Wexit. And to be honest, that's exactly what's happening here. Wow. And so when they do these things, when they treat SOCONs as badly as they have, these people either are going to stay at home or not volunteer or look for something else to put their vote behind. Right. So I think Erin O'Toole is actually on thin ice. And now that he's won, I see him giving these interviews where he says, well, I'm one of the most sensitive guys on these LGBT issues, and and all this type of stuff, and I'm pro-choice, etc. Well, he's alienating the base in order to gain a small percentage of people who, frankly, let's take the trans community. They could easily vote NDP. Why not? And so when you try to reach in and scoop away some of the transgender vote, you're going to be losing all the churchgoers. I don't think that's a smart electoral strategy.
Yeah, it's I see some liberals are already reported on CBC. Some liberals are trying to get O'Toole to throw Derek Sloan out. I don't think he'll be that dumb to do that, but
well, there's red Tories in the party that would love to do that, right? Yeah. Because they're trying to do scorched earth on SOCONs. And here's another one, Jim Karahalios. He corrected the Ontario Progressive Conservatives with regard to the carbon tax, fought almost a one-man crusade on that to change them away from believing in the kind of carbon capture, Kyoto, Paris Accord stuff. And he drew attention to Walid Solomon and the Muslim Brotherhood and their connections to Erin O'Toole. And then O'Toole went after him for that, to get him removed. And I think Jim Karahalios would have been great as kind of like a bomb thrower, as a guy to expose things in this race, a lightning rod of sorts. And they threw him out, So that was another symbol. And then I want to talk about some of the other people who didn't run but were approached, because this gives you a sense of the dynamic as well. So with Rona Ambrose, she was recruited by Harper, Kenney, John Baird. I've seen Stephen Harper, Jason Kenney, John Baird. She was the first interim leader of the Conservative Party of Canada march in a pride parade. Mm-hmm. And so they were reaching out to her, trying to get her in. Okay, but she was like, no, don't want to do it. So then they were reaching out to Pierre Poilievre, who's, I know his family. I've known he's involved with the campus club here at the University of Calgary, et cetera. Harper, Kenney, and Baird, once again, were trying to recruit him. And they encouraged him to attack social conservatives like Richard Descartes. And what that was doing is it was destroying his own base. So he pulled out to save his brand and not be the puppet of Harper and Baird. And then what you had was John Baird, who was recruited by Harper and endorsed by Jason Kenney. And he might have got traction were it not for the fact that when he was a minister in Queen's Park, there was a young staffer by the name of John Biggs who was gay, as is Baird, but didn't like the fact that he alleged he got groped by Baird, etc. Right? So this thing went viral on Twitter, a Twitter storm, if you will, and that killed, Baird's candidacy. And then another guy I wanted to see in this race, but decided he didn't have the time frame to be able to ramp it up appropriately, was John Williamson, who at least was a full spectrum conservative, not Western based, which I think would have been best for the party, but was at least out of New Brunswick, et cetera, whatever, and had a decent track record on a lot of conservative issues.
Yeah, he's good on a lot of things. So
yeah.
And I think that in retrospect, somebody who didn't run, who Peter MacKay would have liked to have seen run, was Marilyn Gladue.
Right.
She was more farther on the left, and he possibly could have pulled in some of her second choices.
Right.
But with his urge to speed up everything, she didn't make the deadline, and he's probably kicking himself now.
You know what that guy was thinking by trying to speed up this race with COVID? I mean, he shot himself in the foot, if not more the head. I mean, it was ridiculous because he killed his down ballot support. And when you had multiple candidates like this, ridiculous. He was the mean girl at the beauty contest, and those girls don't win because the other girls don't like them. You know, that's how this goes. He should have taken a lesson from his wife.
Yeah.
So in terms of the winner, Erin O'Toole, we've said a few things about him. He's not really a social conservative. He's not reaching out to pro-lifers. We know that for sure. Anything to like about him? Anything that else that we should be cautious about?
I guess he was open to SOCON saying if they want to bring forward a bill, if they want to run for us, you know, et cetera, whatever, which is more than MacKay was doing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he was just less mean. He was just less mean. Yeah. He was more miscongeniality than Peter MacKay was. That's kind of the reason he won.
He had a good stage presence in the debates and all that.
For sure. You know, so but he's got to be careful because you know, this is a fractious thing, and the way they disqualified social conservatives and what have you, and treated them in this race. And the way, frankly, that they're trying to throw Sloan under the bus, they try to do it during the race and they're trying to do it now, does not bode well for them. And he's an Eastern-based, you know, guy who ran as a red Tory last time. This is not popular in Western Canada and amongst the base in Alberta. I think Wexit is going to be profiting off that big time. And if he continues to give his interviews where he's talking about, well, you know, I'm the cheerleader for the LGBT and, you know, et cetera, and I'm pro-choice, you know, woohoo, he's going to be alienating more and more of that base. And I hear them. They phone me, they talk to me, they ask me what's going on. They're concerned. They're thinking about ripping up their memberships, right? It's a lot of stuff.
Well, we're giving out memberships or selling memberships.
You'll take them.
You know,
yeah, open arms, right?
All those who are looking for a home. In terms of Wexit, you know, I haven't looked a whole lot at them because, you know, my idea is that I like to keep Canada together for number one. And number two, if you know, hive off a part of the country, unfortunately, you're still going to find problems there and problematic thinking, you know, which is has permeated our, you know, education system across the country. You know, unfortunately, you're going to be running into some of the same problems and with some new ones thrown in. So, but where does Wexit stand on abortion and LGBT stuff? Do they have clear positions on those?
As far as I know, there's no official policy as of yet. It reminds me a lot of the early Reform Party. So, you know, for example, I was a policy officer for the Reform Party Student Society at the University of Calgary, and the gay, lesbians, academic students and staff, whatever group at the University of Calgary, invited all the political parties in. The NDP sent a gay guy. The Liberals sent in somebody who was, you know, huggy with all that stuff. The Tories sent in somebody who read a prepared message and then ran out of the room. And I was there, you know, along with a girl for the Reform Party. And for 2 hours, they just beat us up relentless about what's your policy on this and what's your policy on that and we were like, we don't have one. It's like these aren't our top of mind issues. You know, if you want lower taxes and you want tough on crime and you want a stronger military, vote for the Reform Party. And that's kind of where Wexit's at. It's like, I don't think they have any policies on this stuff. And of course, the LGBT lobby is not going to like that very much. They're going to say, well, you need to take a stand on blood and marriage and, you know, blah, blah, blah. We'll see.
The saddest thing that I think having to do with someone like the Conservative Party leader trying to court the LGBT community. I mean, and march in the pride parades, or, you know, all that stuff. I look at it as political prostitution, but the worst kind, because they're not going to get paid. These folks will cheer to see them in
Right.
the parade or,
Yeah.
conservative
Yeah.
leaders, but they're not going to vote for them. So it's
No, right. That's that exactly, Rod. So you get this thing where the conservative leadership vote was originally set for one day before the Pride Parade, potentially in Toronto, which COVID interrupted, et cetera. And so the intention was, McKay thought, well, I'm going to announce that I'm going to march in the Pride Parade, so I'm going to win, and I'm going to go out, But I mean, Joan Crockett, love her. She was the MP for Calgary Centre. She was a very, nice lady, very open. Wanted to be loved, etc. And so they had a Pride Parade right in the middle of her riding in Calgary, and she said, well, if you want me to go, I'll go, etc. And she got attacked. She's a nice lady. Like doesn't have a mean bone in her body. And they scourged her and said, no, you're not welcome, and you can't come here because you weren't originally, a supporter of this, blah, blah, blah. And, you haven't done enough. And, woe is you and all this type of stuff. Well, if McKay had gone to something like that, would you think that one appearance at this stuff, they're going to say, oh, we're going to choose you over Sven Robinson or Jack Layton or, something. Give me a break.
You may have seen the article, the BC NDP and the LGBT movement in BC just tried to put an arm twist on the BC Liberals, which of course are, far from a social conservative organization. But,
I'm well aware.
They said, if you don't fire Laurie Thrones, kick him out of caucus.
Unreal.
For advertising in a Christian magazine,
right?
You can't march in the Pride Parade with us. I mean, what kind of a threat is that? But anyway, they will try every kind of pressure tactic to.
Yeah, I worked with Laurie back when he was a researcher for us for the Reform Party back in the early days. My staffer Angela Violini, then Ford, married Jason Ford, was working with him closely on the HRDC files and stuff like that. And yeah, that's just sad. I think the huge unexploited, if you will, issue in BC politics is this SOGI issue. Sexual orientation, gender identity. I think just like in Ontario, where parents were livid that the Ontario education system was being dictated to by this Benjamin Levin, who is a convicted pedophile. You've got people in British Columbia that are sick to their stomachs with regard to the treatment of this Dutch Hoagland, with regard to his kid, his daughter, etc., and the agenda that's going on with SOGI. I think if there was a political party that championed that issue and said, you know what, we're going to fight this. We don't believe in this. We think this is brainwashing. We think this is child abuse. I think they would actually do well. But because they're scared of the mainstream media and the attacks they're going to take from the LGBT lobby, they're scared and they're cautious.
Well, CHP BC, and British Columbia is the only province that has a provincial wing. You've met some of our members.
Yes, sir.
When your trips to BC. And I don't know if you saw that we are having an AGM in September, and I've been holding down the position as interim leader for several years. But Laura Lynn Tyler Thompson is stepping forward to run for the leadership of our party.
She is fantastic. Yeah. That lady, I've heard nothing but good about some of the stuff she's done exposing the COVID stuff recently, and all the paranoia and the fear-mongering that's been around that. She's awesome. I've sat and chatted with her on many occasions. She gets it. She really understands the agenda and who's behind it and the black hands and, the media influence and all that stuff. She gets it. She's fantastic. Good on you. If I have the time and the ability, I think that would be an AGM worth attending and checking out for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, September 12th in Abbotsford. So anyway, I'm very looking forward to it. It'll be the first time I've flown since I flew back from the CPAC in Washington, which, by the way, thank you for encouraging me to attend that. That was well worth it. And it was may have been the last one of its kind. It was certainly the last big event before they closed the border. So
yeah. Yeah, once again, I'll just do a plug for that Conservative Political Action Conference that they have, usually just outside of Washington, D.C. Historically used to be Arlington, Virginia. Now they sometimes do it in Baltimore, Maryland. It is fantastic. It is catnip for conservatives. Even if you don't pay any money, you can go downstairs. There's 200 organizations giving out swag, in groups that Canadians have never even thought of. And then you go upstairs and all the big wiggies in the movement. I mean, I've heard Michelle Bachmann and Scott Walker and Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum and Mitt Romney and Donald Trump and, you name it, it's there. 10,000 of the best conservative activists in the country. Fantastic. Highly recommended.
Yeah, it was very good. So thanks for pushing me in that direction. So,
you're welcome, sir.
Yeah. Peter, go ahead.
Well, we are probably almost at the end of our time here. Just wanted to just take one last look at Canadian politics here. And if I could, just ask you what you think about this fall in terms of the possibility of an election. There's a lot of saber rattling. Is it going to happen or not?
Well, I think Trudeau wanted it. He was looking for a way to pull the plug on himself because he was getting all this exposure from COVID, going out every day in front of 24 sessions. By the way, there's still a lot of scandal to be looked at in terms of this. All the expenses that were done to build a separate residence for his wife at Harrington Lake and all this stuff. Like, why is Sophie Trudeau not wanting to live with her husband? What's going on with that? Et cetera, right? So there's more to be dug up on that. But along comes the WE scandal, right? Which is really, wow. Like it's Banana Republic third world stuff, right? Where his mother's getting $250,000 and his brother's getting money and they're lining their pockets off this stuff. Morneau's kids involved with it, et cetera. Throwing Morneau under the bus and getting rid of him, to try and blunt the attack. And the $900 million and the Kielburger brothers starting off with, we're going to free kids from, slave labor conditions in third world countries. And now they're promoting all these wild, wacky, progressive agendas at their stuff. It's, effectively kind of, brainwashing for kids, it's unreal. And now his numbers are taking a tank. I'm sure his numbers are lower than the Liberal Party of Canada at this stage. The Liberals should be showing him the door. The adults in the room in the Liberal Party should say, you're ruining the brand. Bye-bye. It's time to go. But whether or not they have the power or the cojones to pull it off, we'll see. So at this stage, I think he's got to be fearful of going to the polls. I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But will the other three parties be able to get together and actually pull the trigger? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the poll numbers. If they think they can eat the Liberals' lunch, they'll go to the polls. The Liberals at this stage, and here's the thing, with the prorogation, et cetera, he's trying to buy himself time. He's desperate, right? And originally he was looking for a reason to go to the polls because he had all this exposure over COVID, and he thought, okay, I'm going to pull the trigger, I'm going to do this thing, and I might wind up with a majority government. But now all bets are off, and if the other parties see that they can eat the Liberals' lunch, they'll do it.
The one thing he's got going for him, and it's very sad, but there are people out there making more money now with government handouts, the $343 billion and growing deficit that Morneau and Trudeau handed us. But there are people making more money than they were before COVID because of the handouts, and unfortunately that affects some people's perception. They think, we got a good thing going. They're not thinking about
it's socialism 101. It's the next Venezuela. The problem they have in that country is that people get subsidized gasoline, et cetera, et cetera. They get food rationed, and for some people, they're like, well, it's good enough, as long as I got my hammock and, whatever. And those are the people who vote for these people like, Maduro now post Chavez, et cetera. And Trudeau and some of his characters, they're perfectly fine with that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we certainly have a cultural divide. It's really around the world, certainly in North America, U.S. and Canada. The different worldviews that are competing for acceptance, and unfortunately, the public education system has fed the one for so long the mass media. But have you been watching the U.S. The Republican convention at all?
Yeah. Matter of fact, last night I was watching Mike Pence's acceptance of the nomination for vice president. What a great guy. I really like Pence. His background in radio and all that type of stuff, giving him lots of eloquence, etc. Reagan used to do something similar, in between his bouts of governor and presidency, etc. Reminded me of that. What an epic struggle that's going on inside the United States. The Chinese consulate in Houston was shut down by the U.S. government because TikTok was having Huawei numbers used on it to promote and psychographically target the people who were receptive to the Antifa and Black Lives Matter messages, and to go out and riot and cause all these problems, turn over police cars, harm police officers, desecrate public buildings, et cetera, et cetera. So, wow. It's like a Batman film. Right? You look at the evil villains trying to destroy Gotham. This is it. This is the U.S. election in 2020. Wow.
Right. So much at stake.
Quite dramatically there, but yeah.
Peter?
Well, Rod, did you have a last point that you wanted to make on?
Well, of course, I want to thank our guest, Rob. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. You're a source of wisdom, knowledge, and guidance, and we appreciate your efforts over your political career to stand up for what's true and right. And so we admire that in you and in others who are serving in various levels in government. And when they have to take on their party or people within their party who attack them, you've stood strong, and we really appreciate you coming on with us today to discuss some of these things.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. It's been an honor.
Well, thank you all for watching, for listening to our audience, and thanks again, Rob, and we hope that you will join us for another edition of CHP Talks. I know we mentioned Derek Sloan a few times through this interview, and we did interview him in a previous CHP talk. So if you have interest as a listener in knowing a little bit more of what he has stood for and what he's standing for, you might want to go back and check out that back issue of CHP Talks. So Thanks again. God bless. We hope to see you next week.
Yeah. Bye-bye.